for 3,000 years until Alexander the Great's armies conquered it in the 4th century BC. Ancient Egypt was the most important civilization in the world.
The ancient Egyptians were one of history's most remarkable civilizations, known for their groundbreaking achievements in architecture, medicine, and culture. But beyond the towering pyramids and legendary pharaohs, they had some truly bizarre customs and practices that might surprise you. Here are 25 strange things the ancient Egyptians did that will change the way you see this ancient society. Let's dive in. Mummification of animals. In ancient Egypt, animals were often seen as sacred or as living forms of gods. Cats, for example, were linked to the goddess Bastet, who symbolized home, fertility, and protection. Because of this deep reverence, animals were sometimes mummified after death. This practice was not just a way to preserve pets, but part of a religious belief that animals played an important role in the spiritual lives of their owners. Many were buried alongside humans, showing the idea that they would join them in the afterlife. There were 3 main types of animal mummies. Some were carefully preserved and buried with humans, reflecting a strong bond and the hope of reuniting in the afterlife. Others were bred specifically for mummification and offered to gods in temples. These offerings were often less carefully prepared, with some containing only parts of an animal, showing that the ritual itself mattered more than perfect preservation. A third category included sacred animals, like the Apis bull, which were believed to be earthly forms of gods. These animals lived in temples, cared for by priests, and received elaborate burials after death, similar to those of pharaohs. The mummification process for animals followed steps similar to those used for humans, but was adjusted for different species. Embalmers removed internal organs to prevent decay, treating them with natron, a natural salt, before placing them in protective jars. The body was then dried, wrapped in linen, and sometimes adorned with amulets to ensure a safe journey to the afterlife. This careful preparation reflected the Egyptians' belief that proper burial ensured an animal's continued existence beyond death. Opening of the mouth ceremony. The opening of the mouth ceremony was an important ritual in ancient Egypt, believed to restore the senses of the deceased for their journey into the afterlife. Egyptians thought that upon death, a person lost their ability to see, speak, and eat, making this ceremony essential. Priests performed the ritual by touching the mouth and eyes of the mummy or its statue with special tools, enabling the deceased to eat, drink, and experience light, key elements for eternal life. Beyond its practical role, the ceremony had deep spiritual meaning, linking to themes of rebirth and transformation in Egyptian mythology. It was closely associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife, who himself was resurrected. Through this ritual, the dead were believed to follow Osiris's path and secure a place in eternity. The ceremony was typically performed on the 70th day after death, once embalming was complete. Priests, dressed in ceremonial attire, conducted the ritual, with one wearing a jackal-headed mask of Anubis, the god of mummification. Holding the coffin upright, they used sacred tools, often shaped like a fishtail, to touch different parts of the body, especially the mouth and eyes. Among these tools was the peseshkef, believed to have magical powers to restore life. Each touch was accompanied by chants invoking gods like Ptah and Thoth, calling on them to revive the deceased's senses. These spells emphasized purification and divine assistance in regaining essential faculties. Over time, the ceremony evolved. Originally performed on statues representing gods or the dead, it later became a key part of the mummification process itself. This shift reflected changing views on death and burial in ancient Egyptian society. Bathing in sour milk. Bathing in sour milk was a well-known beauty treatment in ancient Egypt, famously linked to Queen Cleopatra. As the last ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom, Cleopatra was admired for her beauty and sophistication. Ancient sources suggest she bathed in sour donkey milk to keep her skin soft and smooth. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder even noted that donkey milk was believed to reduce wrinkles and improve skin texture, with some women washing their faces with it several times a day. Today, dermatologists recognize lactic acid, found in sour milk, as a key ingredient in many skincare products for its hydrating and rejuvenating effects. In ancient Egypt, beauty was closely tied to status, and using sour milk baths was not just a grooming choice but a sign of wealth and refinement. Cleopatra's beauty rituals enhanced her image as a powerful and captivating figure, inspiring noblewomen to follow her practices. Beyond aesthetics, skin care in ancient Egypt had spiritual significance. Bathing was often accompanied by prayers or offerings to gods linked to beauty and health, reinforcing the belief that physical appearance reflected divine favor. The use of moldy bread to heal wounds. The ancient Egyptians had impressive medical knowledge, using natural remedies like herbal treatments and even moldy bread to heal wounds. The mold on this bread may have contained bacteria-fighting properties similar to modern antibiotics. While it is not confirmed that penicillium was present, the practice suggests an early understanding of infection prevention. This practice shows that Egyptians unknowingly tapped into the principles of antimicrobial treatment long before modern medicine existed. While using moldy bread to treat wounds wasn't unique to Egypt, the Egyptians stood out for their organized approach to medicine. Texts like the Ebers Papyrus reveal many treatments and remedies from that time. Applying moldy bread showed they understood basic hygiene and infection control, vital for medical care even back then. Recent research confirms that some molds have antibiotic properties that stop bacteria from growing. The ancient Egyptians probably noticed these effects through trial and error, using moldy bread as part of their medical practices without knowing the science behind it. Wearing of false beards. The tradition of wearing false beards in ancient Egypt began around 3000 BC and symbolized a pharaoh's divine authority. More than decoration, the beard linked rulers to gods like Osiris and Ra, reinforcing their right to rule. While typically worn by male pharaohs, female rulers like Hatshepsut also adopted the beard to assert their power in a male-dominated society. Hatshepsut, who ruled from about 1479 to 1458 BCE, started as a co-regent with her stepson Thutmose III, but later declared herself pharaoh. She adopted the full regalia of male kings, including the Nemes headdress, Shendit kilt, and false beard. This was not to hide her gender but to strengthen her legitimacy as ruler. The beard's design, resembling divine figures, further emphasized her divine right to rule, proving that symbols of power in ancient Egypt could transcend gender. The use of baboons in fighting criminals. Ancient Egyptian reliefs, like the mastaba of Tepe Monk, circa 2498 to 2345 BC, depict baboons assisting in law enforcement. One scene from Saqqara shows a baboon biting a thief's leg while a handler restrains it with a leash. This suggests baboons were trained to catch criminals, particularly in marketplaces where theft was common. Their agility and strength made them valuable in restraining suspects. The olive baboon, Papio anubis, and Hamadryas baboon, Papio hamadryas, were ideal for this role due to their intelligence. Training them was likely difficult, requiring discipline, food rewards, and repetitive conditioning. Reliefs show handlers using leashes for control, reinforcing both practical and symbolic meanings. Beyond policing, baboons were sacred, linked to Thoth and Ra. Their morning calls were seen as hymns to the sun god, blending law enforcement with divine justice. This practice highlights the Egyptians' deep understanding of animal behavior and interspecies cooperation. Execration rituals. Execration rituals date back to the Old Kingdom, 2613 to 2181 BCE, and persisted through the Middle Kingdom and even into the Roman period. The earliest examples feature unbaked clay figurines shaped like bound captives, inscribed with names in red ink. Over 400 such figurines were discovered at Giza, highlighting the widespread and deeply ingrained nature of these practices. Execration texts served both as lists of enemies, often foreign rulers or internal threats, and as a form of magical protection for the state. Inscribing a name onto a figurine or clay pot and then smashing, stabbing, burning, or even urinating on it symbolically eliminated the threat. These rituals were especially prominent during periods of conflict. One recorded ritual describes spitting on the target 4 times, trampling them with the left foot, striking them with a spear, and slaughtering them with a knife, demonstrating the ritual's violent and symbolic nature. The fragments of destroyed objects were typically buried near tombs or ritual sites, reinforcing their connection to both death and protective magic. Archaeological discoveries, such as those at Mirgisa, reveal the scale of these practices. Nearly 200 broken red vases and countless inscribed figurines have been found, suggesting both state-sponsored and personal use. This dual function underscores how execration rituals permeated both public and private life in ancient Egypt. Using magical birth bricks. Ancient Egyptian texts and art show that childbirth often took place in a squatting position, with a woman's feet resting on 2 mud bricks. This method likely helped delivery by using gravity. The discovery of these birth bricks confirms their role in childbirth and highlights the strong belief in magic and rituals for safe births. A remarkable example is a 3,700-year-old birth brick found at Abydos by University of Pennsylvania archaeologists. Measuring about 14 by 7 inches, it is decorated with images of a mother holding her baby, female attendants, and deities like Hathor, the goddess of motherhood. It was found in a noblewoman's home, showing its use among elites in the Middle Kingdom, 2055 to 1650 BCE. These bricks were linked to Meskenet, a goddess believed to protect births. Magical symbols and deity images on the bricks acted as charms to guard against evil, ensuring the mother and baby's safety. The use of wigs. Wigs in ancient Egypt date back to 3400 BCE and were mainly worn by elites, including pharaohs and nobles. Made from human hair, plant fibers, or wool, they showcased expert craftsmanship. Wigs were not just for style. They protected the scalp from sunburn while allowing air circulation to keep the head cool in the hot climate. Beyond their practical use, wigs symbolized status and wealth. Elaborate styles indicated high rank, and priests wore them in religious ceremonies to show their importance. Egyptians also shaved their heads for hygiene, as wigs helped prevent lice and kept the scalp clean. Their mesh-like structure allowed ventilation while providing shade. Wigs held deep cultural meaning, often linked to deities like Hathor, the goddess of beauty and motherhood. They also carried erotic significance, making women more desirable. This blend of function and symbolism highlights wigs' important role in ancient Egyptian society. The significance of crocodiles. Crocodiles held a special place in ancient Egypt. They were both feared as dangerous predators and revered as symbols of protection and fertility. The god Sobek, often shown with a crocodile head, represented both the Nile's power and its life-giving force. Egyptians believed that mummifying crocodiles would earn Sobek's favor and protection. Some crocodile mummies were even adorned with gold and buried in elaborate tombs. Mummifying crocodiles was most common during the Ptolemaic period, though it began earlier. Archaeologists estimate that a vast number of crocodiles, potentially in the millions, were mummified as offerings, but the exact number remains uncertain. Recent discoveries at Kubbat al-Hawa reveal unique preservation methods. Some crocodiles were naturally dried in hot sand instead of being treated with resins. A remarkable find includes a 2,000 to 3,000-year-old crocodile with stones in its stomach for digestion and a fishhook inside, suggesting it was caught just before being sacrificed. These discoveries offer insight into Egyptian rituals and fishing practices. The ancient Egyptians' use of toxic ingredients. Ancient Egyptian cosmetics were made from natural minerals. Galena, lead sulfide, was ground into powder to create kohl, black eye paint, while malachite, copper carbonate, formed green eye pigments. Kohl was applied around the eyes in almond shapes, symbolizing protection from gods like Horus and Ra. Malachite, sourced from Sinai, was mixed with animal fats or plant resins to make a paste. These cosmetics were stored in decorative containers, some of which were buried with the dead, showing their spiritual significance. Beyond their appearance, these cosmetics had practical benefits. Kohl's lead compounds had antibacterial properties, helping prevent eye infections common in Egypt's dusty, flood-prone areas. Lead ions also boosted immune responses and shielded eyes from sun glare and flies. Malachite was used for treating burns and skin problems and was linked to fertility in religious contexts. However, long-term use of lead and copper has health risks. Lead could cause poisoning, while copper could irritate the skin. Honey-covered servants of Pharaoh Pepi II. Pharaoh Pepi II of the 6th dynasty, around 2278 BC, is remembered for his unusual habits and lengthy reign, lasting an estimated 64 to 94 years. Ascending the throne at only 6 years old, his long rule marked both the peak and the slow decline of the Old Kingdom. One peculiar practice involved smearing his servants with honey to attract flies away from him. Pepi II despised flies, so he used his honey-coated servants as live fly traps during meals and leisure, ensuring that bothersome insects stayed clear of his presence. Interestingly, despite his dislike, flies were admired in ancient Egyptian culture for their persistence and speed, even appearing in art and as golden amulets for soldiers. This odd method not only highlights Pepi II's personal quirks, but also reflects the extravagant lifestyle of his court during a time of both cultural brilliance and emerging internal challenges. The use of sacred pools for purification. In ancient Egypt, the connection between physical cleanliness and spiritual purity was deeply embedded in religious practices. Priests, in particular, underwent detailed purification rituals, often involving bathing in sacred pools filled with water drawn from revered sources like the Nile River. These purification rites were not only intended to cleanse the body, but also to remove spiritual impurities, preparing the priests to perform their duties in a state of holiness and readiness. Similarly, across various ancient cultures, the practice of ritual bathing held significant religious and spiritual meaning. In Judea and Galilee, the mikvah, a ritual bath, was essential for purification during the Second Temple period. Archaeological discoveries have unearthed numerous stepped pools, underscoring the central role of purification in daily life and religious observance. These pools were not only places for personal purification, but also served as communal spaces for reflection and spiritual renewal. Parallel practices can be found in Hinduism, where sacred springs and purification tanks, kunds, play a central role in cleansing rituals. The Pura Tirtha Empul temple in Bali exemplifies this tradition, with visitors immersing themselves in pools fed by holy spring water, believed to purify both body and spirit. Water, in many of these traditions, is viewed as a divine element, life-giving and purifying, underscoring its vital importance in both physical and spiritual realms. Shaving eyebrows as morning rituals. In ancient Egypt, cats were not just beloved companions, but also sacred animals deeply intertwined with religious and cultural practices. They were revered as embodiments of protection, grace, and mystery, and were associated with the goddess Bastet, often depicted as a lioness or domestic cat. Bastet represented home, fertility, and domesticity, qualities that were mirrored in the way Egyptians viewed their feline companions. Cats were cared for lavishly and were even given elaborate burial rites, reflecting their esteemed status in Egyptian society. The emotional bond between Egyptians and their cats was profound, to the point that the death of a cat could trigger public mourning. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, the family of a deceased cat would shave their eyebrows as a sign of grief. This ritual not only marked personal sorrow, but also served as a public acknowledgement of the deep connection between humans and cats. The act of shaving eyebrows symbolized the emotional impact of the loss and marked the bereaved as individuals in mourning until their eyebrows naturally grew back, which could take months. This mourning ritual, while unique to ancient Egyptian culture, highlighted the significance of animals in their lives, particularly those closely tied to religious symbolism like cats. In fact, similar mourning practices extended to other pets as well. For instance, some records suggest that Egyptians shaved their eyebrows in mourning for cats, and similar practices may have extended to dogs. While cats held a special place due to their divine associations, the emotional connection to pets in general was strongly felt across the culture. Wearing mouse bones as a remedy for bedwetting. Bedwetting has been a common issue among children throughout history. In ancient Egypt, treatments such as reed-based beverages were used, as mentioned in the Papyrus of Ebers around 3500 BC. Over time, various cultures developed remedies based on their medical beliefs, often involving animal parts, as they were thought to transfer the animal's strength to humans. The use of mouse bones to treat bedwetting likely combined superstition and early medical practices. Mice were associated with fertility, and wearing mouse bones was believed to improve bladder control. This practice served both a physical and psychological purpose. It addressed bedwetting while offering comfort to the child and caregivers. The visible remedy also helped reduce the stigma of the condition, signaling to others that the child was undergoing treatment. Although modern medicine offers more effective treatments, like behavioral conditioning and medication, traditional remedies like the use of mouse bones have persisted in some cultures, reflecting the enduring nature of folk practices. The alabaster sistrum, The sistrum, originally linked to the worship of the goddess Bat and later Hathor, the goddess of love, fertility and motherhood, features a U-shaped frame with a handle resembling Hathor's face and horns, symbolizing her protective qualities. Some variations are naos-shaped, with carvings of deities and hieroglyphics, highlighting their sacred nature. Crafted from materials like alabaster, valued for its purity and beauty, the sistrum's design enhanced its spiritual resonance. The soft texture of alabaster allowed intricate details while amplifying the instrument's sacred sound, believed to invoke divine presence and aid in communication with the gods. Used in religious rituals, the sistrum's rhythmic sound was thought to ward off evil spirits and attract divine favor. During libation ceremonies, its noise-making function, often adorned with symbols like cobras and representations of Horus, reinforced its role as a protective charm, fostering harmony between the earthly and spiritual realms. Ritualistic use of incense in ancient ceremonies. Incense use dates back to ancient civilizations, with the Indus Valley Civilization, around 3600 BC, being one of the earliest known users. The ancient Egyptians, during the 5th dynasty, 2345 to 2494 BC, adopted incense in religious practices, using it in ceremonies to maintain cosmic order and honor gods. Incense, made from natural resins, woods, and spices, was believed to have purifying properties. The practice spread across the Near East and into Asia, becoming integral to Buddhist, Taoist, and Shinto traditions. In these cultures, incense is burned during rituals to purify spaces and connect with spiritual beings. In Chinese temples, incense offerings are made to ancestors and deities, with the rising smoke carrying prayers to the heavens. Burning incense serves as a purification method, cleansing both the space and participants. Its fragrant smoke is thought to dispel negative energies, as reflected in religious texts like Exodus verse 30, chapters 1 to 10. Symbolically, incense represents prayers ascending to the divine, as seen in Psalm 141, emphasizing its role in seeking divine favor and guidance. Customs around death masks. The tradition of creating death masks dates back to ancient civilizations, with ancient Egypt being one of the most notable examples. Egyptians believed in the Ka, a spiritual double that continued to exist after death. To help the Ka recognize its body in the afterlife, death masks were placed over mummified remains. Often made from precious materials like gold and adorned with jewels, these masks reflected the deceased's status and wealth, while also protecting against evil spirits on their journey. The most famous Egyptian death mask is that of Tutankhamun, made of gold and intricately designed to represent the pharaoh's likeness and divine status. Death masks were not exclusive to Egypt. Similar customs were seen in other cultures, including Rome, where wax masks were created to honor the deceased. These masks were displayed during funerals to commemorate loved ones, and in many societies were believed to maintain a spiritual connection between the living and the dead. Animal mummies found in mass graves. Archaeological evidence suggests that up to 70 million animals may have been mummified throughout ancient Egyptian history, with mass graves found at over 30 sites. Saqqara alone holds nearly 500,000 mummified ibises and about 8 million dog mummies in catacombs dedicated to Anubis, the jackal-headed god of death. This large-scale mummification points to a well-organized system of breeding and sacrifice driven by religious needs. The existence of animal cults highlights the importance of these practices. Certain groups, like priests, were responsible for caring for and overseeing the mummification of sacred animals, such as ibises and dogs. The catacombs at Saqqara show a complex infrastructure designed to store these offerings, revealing the significant spiritual and economic role animal cults played in ancient Egyptian society. The mass numbers of animal mummies suggest these cults operated on an industrial scale to meet ritual and burial demands. This connection between religion and economy underscores the central role of animal worship in ancient Egypt's culture, where mummifying animals symbolized deep spiritual beliefs and reinforced community bonds. The use of shadoofs for irrigation. The shadoof, believed to have originated in ancient Mesopotamia and was later adopted by the Egyptians, was a crucial tool for irrigation. It consisted of a long pole balanced on a pivot, with a bucket at one end and a counterweight at the other. Farmers used it to lift water from the river and irrigate fields, allowing them to grow crops away from the riverbanks. Made from locally available materials like wood and rope, the shaduf was easy to build and operate, sometimes with the help of animals like oxen. The shaduf was key to managing water from the Nile, supporting Egypt's agriculture. By lifting water from the river, Egyptians could irrigate dry fields, increasing crop yields and expanding arable land. This innovation was vital for food security, supporting Egypt's growing population. Additionally, agriculture was closely tied to religion, with rituals honoring gods of fertility and crop growth. The shaduf played an important role in Egypt's economy and culture, playing board games like Senet. Board games have long reflected the societies that create them, offering insights into their cultural values, social structures, and spiritual beliefs. One of the most significant ancient Egyptian board games is Senet, one of the oldest known games in history. The game featured a rectangular board with 30 squares arranged in 3 rows of 10. Players moved pieces based on the results of casting sticks or knucklebones, with the goal of navigating all pieces of the board. This journey symbolized the soul's passage through the afterlife, a core belief in ancient Egyptian culture. The name Senet, meaning to pass or to go by, reflects this connection to the afterlife. The last 5 squares often depicted deities or hazards that mirrored the challenges of life and death. Senet was enjoyed by all social classes, from pharaohs to commoners, with luxurious sets made from materials like ivory and faience, alongside simpler versions. Other ancient Egyptian games, such as Mayhen and 20 Squares, also featured strategic gameplay and cultural symbolism. Like chess, Senet combined strategy and chance, with players not only advancing pieces, but also blocking opponents, showcasing a rich tradition of board gaming in ancient Egypt. The role of dwarfs in the ancient culture. Dwarfs in ancient Egypt were highly respected and held important roles, including jewelers, tailors, cupbearers, and zookeepers, as shown in tomb reliefs and inscriptions. For instance, Seneb, a dwarf official from the 5th dynasty, was buried in a grand tomb near the Giza pyramids, emphasizing his elite position. His roles, such as overseer of dwarfs in the palace and overseer of weavers, show his administrative duties within the royal household. Dwarfs also managed royal zoos, caring for animals like leopards and monkeys, and were valued as jewelers for their honesty, as their distinct appearance made theft noticeable. Pharaohs like Pepi II actively sought dwarves, prioritizing them even over other treasures, indicating their cultural and entertainment value. Dwarfs were closely tied to religious practices, with gods like Bes and Ptah depicted as dwarfs, representing guardianship and renewal. However, by the New Kingdom, their status declined, with later depictions often mocking them. Ritualistic tattoos in ancient Egypt. Tattooing in ancient Egypt was practiced for both aesthetic and ritualistic purposes, particularly in the workmen's village of Deir el-Medina, active from 1550 to 1070 BCE. This site, where artisans built tombs for the pharaohs, provides insights into the lives and beliefs of these workers. Studies of mummies from Deir el-Medina reveal tattoos linked to fertility and childbirth rituals. Researchers Anne Austin and Marie-Lise Arnett analyzed tattoos on 2 female mummies, discovering protective symbols like Bes, the god of childbirth, and the Wedjat, Eye of Horus, which represented safeguarding and healing. Childbirth, a perilous event in ancient Egypt, involved various rituals, with tattoos acting as protective charms. These symbols were believed to invoke divine assistance, a concept supported by the presence of tattoos on midwives and attendants. Tattoos also reflected the influence of the goddess Hathor, associated with motherhood, and often featured motifs related to water or marshes, representing comfort and spiritual cleansing. Figurines of tattooed women further suggest that tattoos played a key role in ritual practices for safe childbirth. Feasting on geese. Geese, particularly the Egyptian goose, Alapotion aegyptiaca, held sacred status in ancient Egypt, symbolizing fertility, provision, and divine connection. They were closely associated with deities such as Geb, the god of the earth, and Amun, a creator god linked to fertility. Hieroglyphs featuring geese reinforce their symbolic significance, representing life and renewal. Beyond religious symbolism, geese played a vital role in funerary practices. Tomb paintings and reliefs often depicted them as offerings for the deceased, ensuring sustenance in the afterlife. Domesticated for their meat, eggs, and feathers, geese were integral to both daily life and special occasions. Scenes of geese grazing or being prepared for feasts illustrate their economic and ritual importance. During religious festivals, geese were served as delicacies and offered as sacrifices to secure divine favor. Mythologically, geese were linked to creation narratives, including the belief in Ingji Garor, the great honker, a goose that laid the primordial egg from which the sun emerged. Their presence in rituals was thought to attract divine blessings. Geese were also included in mummification and burial goods, further emphasizing their spiritual role. The famous Geese of Medum fresco showcases their artistic and cultural significance. Hieroglyphs and artworks featuring geese highlight their deep-rooted connection to ancient Egyptian beliefs, bridging the earthly and divine realms. The role of the Book of the Dead in ancient Egyptian afterlife beliefs. The Book of the Dead evolved from earlier funerary texts, including the pyramid texts and coffin texts, reflecting a shift toward more accessible afterlife beliefs. Initially reserved for pharaohs in the Old Kingdom, 2400 BCE, these texts later became available to non-royal individuals during the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070 BCE. Written on papyrus scrolls, the Book of the Dead contained personalized spells and vivid illustrations to guide the deceased through the afterlife. Comprising over 200 spells, the text provided protection against supernatural threats, ensured sustenance, and facilitated the journey to eternal life. Spell 125, central to the weighing of the heart ceremony, determined one's fate by comparing the heart's weight to Ma'at's feather of truth. Success granted immortality, while failure led to annihilation. Other spells safeguarded identity, body parts, and the spirit's nourishment. Beyond a textual guide, the Book of the Dead played an active role in funerary rituals. Priests recited their spells during burials, believing spoken words carried magical power. Additionally, amulets inscribed with these spells were placed in tombs, reinforcing spiritual protection. This integration into daily and funerary practices underscores the profound influence of afterlife beliefs in ancient Egyptian culture. Thanks for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the strange events of ancient Egypt in the comments. See you next time.